got, I've done this for my section of life, but I'm also getting an inkling towards this now. And I really hope today, just our time together, my life just gives a message. It just says, go on, have a go. Have a go. When God's involved, anything can happen. Now, obviously, we need to always look at stuff like calculated risk and all that stuff. I get that. But I think sometimes we overdo that. I think we're in a brilliant time at the moment where, you know, years ago when you spoke about someone being a pastor, it really was just their pastoral skills. Now, even within the management that I've seen within Pastor Adrian, you've got a really talented man here. You really do. And sometimes we don't, you know, sometimes we judge things by the spirituality, how much do they pray? But you also got to understand it takes a lot to make a church successful and to keep a church successful. And I think sometimes, you know, I hate it when businessmen almost downplay pastors and think, oh, well, yeah, you just go and take care of the sheep. Church isn't like that these days. You know, it's a spiritual organisation. And when you get those two aspects right, boy, you become unstoppable. And the spiritual always comes first. It's like when people say to me, are you a leader? I say, no, I'm a spiritual leader. I understand how to lead, I understand organisation, I understand how to grow people. But first off, I want to lay hands on the sick, I want to raise the dead, I want to preach the gospel, I want people to come into the kingdom. You know, and more the evolving minister today, with his team, has to be really successful in management, entrepreneurial. And in a lot of the pastors that I'm meeting today, it's not just that old skill of they know how to pray, right? And so really impressed with what you've been doing here, and the planting and all that stuff. Okay, a little bit about me and then I'll get into some thoughts. My name's Andy Elms, I'm from Portsmouth, England, and that's where we sent out everybody to plant a little country called Australia from Portsmouth. Also America is on our resume. America, that church plant went a little bit wrong. There's some issue with some taxes, and they just got a little bit annoyed, but it's all right. Hey, look, they got them now, and everything's coming around good. You know, so no, actually, Portsmouth, there's 2 links in Portsmouth, and there's another 2 links of chain in Sydney, and they're corresponding. And on our links, it says, "From these shores, a great nation was born." And it really is Australia is incredible. As I've been going along, it's like we had a tour. Frank took us on tour, and it was like beach, more beach. Oh, there's a beach over there. Oh, look, beach. Hey, beach. and then he said, actually, no, that's Bay. Now let's go to the beach. And I'm like, oh, this is incredible. It's awesome. Now, I was born in Portsmouth, which is inner city. I left school at 15. I've got no education. Just to encourage you that you're listening to someone you need to hear today. Never been to business school, and this is going to shock Adrian. Never been to Bible school. Keep meaning to get round to it. Just been busy, you know. I left school when I was 15, and my dad said, "Well, you've got a choice. I was kind of thinking, let me leave school early and just drift around for a few years." And Dad said, "No, here's the plan. If you leave school, you're going to be in the fruit shop," and that was the family trade, was the fruit shop. The next day. And so I left school at 15 with no education, and they said I'd never academically achieve. I didn't believe them. Don't be sad for me. I didn't believe them. I thought, they don't know what we're talking about. You know, because what you believe about what people speak over you is what determines what you can do. It's whether you're hearing what God's speaking over your life. And so I left school at 15, and I understand now I've probably got a whole bunch of different learning difficulties. I just never sat long enough to think of them. When I went to school, it was real simple. You were fit, and they stuck you in a classroom with like 6 other people like you. You counted eggs, while the other people did. But hardly, that's how I grew up. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating. It's like at school, I was like, I don't get that. I don't get that. My brother was a brainiac. He was like, couldn't get enough. University. I inherited more of the common sense of the dynasty of it all, you know. And we're all wired differently like that, and that's okay. What we can't be is complaining about what we're not. We've got to be soaring in what we are. And people are different in this room. You know, so I left school at 15, and I can remember talking to the careers officer just before I left. I left school just before they asked me to leave. I got in there just before, and that was like great. I knew you were going to throw me out, but I beat you. I beat you. I remember speaking to the careers officer, and he said to me, "What do you want to do with the rest of your life?" I said, "Well, that's a big question, isn't it?" I said, I want to sell fruit and vegetables, and I want to be a fruit and veg man, open shops, and I want to do Elvis impersonation. And he just looked at me. I said, no, I'm serious. I said, I really, because in those days you didn't have karaoke, you know, this was the real deal. You went in, grabbed the DJ's mic and just exposed everyone to your Elvis, you know, and stuff like that. Got my shirt on today. I actually visited Memphis a couple of, about a year ago with my son who's in Bible school, and someone said, what was it like? I said, it must be what a Muslim feels like when he gets to Mecca. You know, it's like, I was trying to get there most of my life, you know. No, you relax. That king's dead in my life. I'm now serving another king. But that's what I wanted to do when I left school. I didn't have any big dreams or anything like that. That happened when I came into a kingdom. That's when I began to dream. So I sold fruit and veg from the age of 15 and was doing Elvis stuff and that kind of stuff, which was a funny section. My life went off the rails, really did. 24, I came, you know, we'd been exposed to church when I was about 9. My family got saved radically. I kind of came into it as a kid. 9 to 16 was fine. 16 I went berserk till I was 24. Got involved in a load of junk and rubbish. 24 encountered Jesus and everything changed. Religion couldn't help me. I couldn't fit into that box. But when I encountered Jesus and heard come and follow me, I was ruined for anything normal. I really wasn't. So at 24, you know, I read the Bible and it said, sell everything and follow me, and I didn't realise you weren't meant to, so I did. I walked away. You know, I thought everybody was doing this, you know, and I realised later that they weren't. So I said to my dad, listen, I've got to go and work for the Lord, and I didn't know what that looked like. So I walked away from the fruit shops, and that's what I was going to do with my life. I'd done other stuff, like I'd opened marketers and I had market stalls and stuff like that. There was always an entrepreneurial gift in me, but I knew that the Lord had put that in me for His purposes later on. But it's amazing what God puts in you can work in business settings. But you've got to understand, the giftings that God's given you are firstly for His purposes.
Yes.
You know, we need kingdom people that like it's been termed for years, there's kings and priests, and the church has had a lot of priests for a lot of years, and that's why we've been broke and not been able to do anything. But there's also an anointing to be a king. Now, when you look in the Bible, there were kings that went out and got wealth, and then they brought that wealth because they had vision to the feet of a priest and said, come on, let's make this happen. And I really believe we're coming back to a time of that kings and priests thinking, that people aren't downgraded in being a king or downgraded in being a priest. We're all working together because the kingdom of God's got to hit every corner of this earth. People need to hear the gospel. People need to come into the kingdom. But how many people know that doesn't just, the currency of that's not good ideas. It also takes money, right? And that's why I really believe that God's releasing business people to be kingdom-minded, so that we can fulfill the plans of God that's on our heart. And He'll put giftings in people that are very different. And I just want to really just declare over you today, you know, don't feel bad if you're a bit different. That could be your strength. That could be the thing that God's going to be using in you. You know, there's a push in the world that we've all got to be the same, but that's not kingdom thinking, you know. So 24, I left everything, went over to New York, started working with drug addicts and that kind of stuff, working with young people, tried to get into Bible school, and then I realised afterwards I probably would have been a bad experience for them as much as them for me. I tried because I thought that's what I had to do. I tried to get into the pattern, which I believe is for some, absolutely, but the whole time in my head I was hearing God say, I'll lead you, I'll guide you. And He always provided for me really key mentors that were there when I needed them to take me to that next level. And I think that's because my heart was always open to learn. You know, I left school and I didn't do good in natural learning, but it didn't mean I wasn't a learner. It's just that I didn't like what they were teaching. Geography, history, didn't mean anything to me. But when I fell in love with Jesus, boy, I can't keep my head out of the Word, out of His ways, you know? It's finding the unique you, if that makes sense. And so I went over to New York, left everything, started working with drug addicts and young people, and then all of a sudden felt God say, it's time to go home, back to England. And so we went home, and I remember praying. I said, all right, Lord, I was an evangelist. I said, all right, I'll go back to England, Lord, but I'll never pastor and I'll never live in Portsmouth. Okay, valuable lesson coming. That's when I learned that God's silence isn't his agreement. He's just teeing you up. He's being kind to get you where he needs you to be. You know, many are the plans in a man's heart, the purposes of God prevail, right? And so I went back to England, and I was like, I'm never going to pastor, I'm never going to live in Portsmouth. And hey, here we are today. I'm in Portsmouth, living in Portsmouth, and pastoring. But again, everything was changing. You've got to understand, your life has got to be led from a whiteboard, not a permanent marker. Just because you've done something for a bit, doesn't mean that's what you're going to be doing all of your days. So when we went back, I had this American type church in my head. You know, one arena, Church Alive is worth a drive. Everybody's going to come from every corner. It's a load of rubbish. In England, they're really parish-minded, which I had to then evolve the church from being one place that everybody came to being, hey, let's let the church go to them. And we started planting out the churches. But again, I never came to England to be a pastor or to be in Portsmouth. We were only ever going to have one big church and everything just keeps changing in my life. But I love it because I'm wired random. If you speak to my other pastors, they're not wired random. And it would be terrible if they were. We'd like blow a load of stuff up, but there wouldn't be anything left afterwards. We'd be like kids playing with dynamite in the park, you know. You have to build around you people that you're not. And you know this in business as well as in team. You know, if you're a visionary, you need people that are able to implement and outwork what you're doing. And if you just build with visionaries, you're gonna kill each other, you know. And so I went through that, and we were planting churches, and at different times the Lord's kind of come into my life with different challenges. And I want to just speak about one aspect, which is the books that we've written. I'm just writing the 7th book right now. Now when I say I'm writing books, you've got to understand, I left school with no education and I still can't do punctuation. I can't. My daughter, even before I go to proofreaders, my daughter spends 15 hours putting full stops and commas in. She said, Dad, it's like reading the dictionary. And I can from manuscript. It's like, you don't breathe, do you? You just don't stop for breath. And she's been teaching me how to put, at 55, she's been teaching me how to put full stops in and commas. And again, I think there's something wrong with me, educationally. But it never limited me, because I realised in writing books, I just needed to provide the content. I needed to provide the such as I am, and I needed to find the silver and gold that I'm not. Right? And again, you can do anything if God's asking you to do it, and you've got the right people in your life. And so I went through life quite happily doing stuff. I was a fruit shop guy, we planted churches, and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden the bomb dropped that made me visit an area in my life that I didn't really want to visit. And I can remember it. It was the first book. I've got Breakfast of Champions 2 here. Obviously it was a Breakfast of Champions 1. And it's all about, I suppose what I want to share with you today is, it's your perspective of you versus God's. And the discovery of his perspective of you is your future. If you live in what others have said about you, or what you've experienced of you in your formative years, you're going to live a very limited life. What you need to hear is what God's speaking over you. And I really sense today I'm doing so much stuff just because I became a yes man real quick. And sometimes I say yes to God and I don't even know what the question is. You know, like, because I know he's looking for someone to say yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I'll say yeah. So I end up doing stuff and I'm like, wow, all right, I don't know if I would have done this if I'd known. Because there's a lot of people not saying yes, so when God has people that are saying yes, but they're saying yes out of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You've got to live with that perspective. Just because what you've seen your fathers and your parents do doesn't mean that's what your limitation is. That's not a lid on your life. Just because you look in the mirror and you see what you see, that shouldn't be a limit on your life. One of my core things is, and it's not arrogant like it wasn't with Paul, I can do anything. I can do anything. Through Christ who strengthens me. My union to a vine and its unlimited potential means that God can do whatever he wants through me. He can download to me. You know what I mean? And we've got to live that way, that anything's possible with God. Now, when your heart's in His hands, it really is. So, there was me happily doing life. I'd been successful in business. I'd started a whole bunch of stuff. And suddenly I'm leading church and I'm planting out church and I'm in my lane. This feels natural to me. Speaking to people, leading people, inspiring people, felt really natural to me. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere I felt the Lord say to me, call yourself an author. And I was like, no Lord, we had a deal. Remember the deal? I left school, they said I'd never academically achieve. Some called me dense. It was termed in different ways. And Lord, I kind of had this deal with you. You can have all of me, but let's not go near that bit of me called education or that side of things. And then I suddenly realised that deal was made by me, not by God.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden He's saying to me, call yourself an author. And again, you try and be a little bit funny with God, don't you? So I said, I haven't got a book. He said, Abraham didn't have a child. Next question. Don't try and argue with it, all right? You'll always win. I'll tell you the journey of that later on. It's amazing what God's already doing in your life that's going to make sense later on.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And so for me, this was a real wine press moment. You know that story of Gideon? Where when God turns up, you can read about it in Judges, Gideon's there, and he's hiding in a wine press. And he's not protecting the crop, he's protecting himself. The guy's a coward. He's just like scared stiff. He's living in this containment of this wine press. And I love it that one day, the voice of God turns up, right? You all know the story, right? And I love the introduction. God looks at Gideon and says, "Ooh, you an animal, aren't you? You mighty man of valor." And in that moment, I kind of expect Gideon to almost go into like, well, very much. You know, I've been waiting for you at last. But no, he's like the biggest coward you've ever seen, right? And he's looking around, and God's calling him a mighty man, and he's walking around the wine press looking through who God's talking to, not even thinking it's him. But then, you look at Gideon's response, just for time's sake, you know, you can go and read this story before if you've not read it. Just for time's sake, Gideon's response is hilarious. He doesn't say to God, this is my moment, I've been waiting. He just begins to spew out this defeatist, I'm the runt of the family of runt, of all runts I am the runtiness. I am the personification of runt. I am failure. If you want to see a picture of failure, hi, I'm here. If you want to see a bigger failure, let me introduce you to my kin. You know, but then God turns around and says to him, ooh, go in these mighty words of yours. I can remember reading the Bible thinking, I've got some issues here. The first one is I'm not seeing the mighty warrior. Secondly, I'm not hearing mighty words. I'm seeing a guy that's acting like a little girl with fully knickers on, running around, scared of everything. That's what I'm seeing. That's my perspective of this guy called Gideon. That's what I'm seeing. But it didn't really matter about me. God wasn't seeing that. So all of a sudden Gideon's got a choice. He can stay in the wine press and live like a coward, living behind his excuses and living in the perception he's got for his life. Or he can step out of the wine press into what God's speaking over his life, into his spirit, into his heart, about his true potential. That was his choice. That's your choice too. That's my choice too. Just because you were born in one sort of family or some sort of economy, none of that stuff should limit you. That's just a wine press. That's just a wine press. That's all it is. Well, I can't do. Yes, you can. That was your parents' issue. It doesn't need to be your issue. You can step out of that. I can tell you about my wine press all day. Apparently, loads of people told me why I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. Loads of people. You know, it's like the old analogy with a bumblebee. They say a bumblebee shouldn't fly because the wing ratio versus the capacity or size of the body frame, there's no way aerodynamically that a bumblebee should fly. What's the issue? No one told the bumblebee. No one told the bumblebee. So the bumblebee just woke up, well, made by God, all things are possible. And he's flying around and everyone's staring at him, going, you shouldn't be flying. That's what my life feels like most of the time. People listen to me and they go, well, you're not very posh, are you? No, I was born the other side of the tracks. Some people were born with a silver spoon, I've got a plastic one. But boy, what a plastic spoon. It's amazing what you can do with plastic. It's a powerful thing, it really is. Everything's perspective. Now, bear with me for a moment, I'm just getting this download right now. If you could all get your finger, this one please, there, this one, and stick that finger, this finger, right there. Now look down on it for a second, right? This isn't witchcraft, I'm not like one of you. But just watch this, right? You're looking down, begin to go that way, all right, clockwise. Yeah, begin to go, I don't know, is that anti or we all good? We're all going anti-clockwise, all right? Everybody, are we all going anti-clockwise? Yeah. All right, don't stop what you're doing. Now lift your finger up. He's a magician. You're not going anti-clockwise anymore. Go down. He's a magician, this guy's a magician. All the change was perspective. All the change was perspective. You went from clockwise, some of you like, this guy's like, who is he? Was he in Pharaoh's courtyard? No, I'm just Andy, you can touch me later. It's amazing. Some of you are going to be all afternoon. It's perspective. Okay, now bear with me. What if you've just been staring at yourself wrong?
Yeah.
And you've not been. What if you're looking at your view of you and you need to see God's view of you? And suddenly all things become possible, right? So Gideon, where were we? Yeah, Gideon's hiding in a wine press like a little girl with frilly knickers. And God's speaking over to him, you're an animal. You're a warrior. And he's spewing out, I'm pathetic. You want to hear my new song? I'm pathetic. But he had a choice. And he chose to step into God's opinion. God's perspective, perception of him. Alright, the rest is history. Flip a page. Suddenly we're introduced to this guy Gideon. And I didn't recognise him, just like I don't recognise Peter after Pentecost. Just, he's gone from -3 to plus 3,000. Alright? And you've got Gideon, now all of a sudden, he's like Braveheart. He's got a horse, he's out now, he's got an army of people, like 32,000 people, he's got blue paint on his face. He's saying, guys, we're going over the hill, we're outnumbered, but we're going to annihilate them. In a Scottish accent. I won't do it because I sound Indian. I do it sound Indian. People are like, that's not Scottish, that's Indian. I said, maybe he has some Indian in him, I don't know, And then suddenly I love it. So in the beginning of the story, you've got God saying, go on, have a go. Now you've got this guy that's become so impressed with himself. He's like, there's only like 30,000 of us. And God, there's over here Gideon, and Gideon gallops over on his horse. And he says, what do you want, Lord? And God says, you've got too many people. All right? He says, go and ask them if they're scared. That's hilarious, eh? The stories, guys that didn't want to be, never want to be Hosea. Absolutely not. Don't want to be Job. But also this moment for Gideon, where he goes back to like 32,000 people and he says, I know you're not because you're animals, but if anyone's scared, I'm going to let you go home. 22,000. 22,000 of them. Imagine if you were a part of 10,000, like, why didn't I lift my hand? 22,000 of them. And you were left with 10,000. And so So Gideon's then going, right, we're going to go over the hill. The army is still outnumbered, but we're going to beat them. He's building morale. And then God says, over here again, over here. And so he's a little bit less confident this time, and the horse has just not got heads down. It's coming over. That's him riding the horse, if you ever worked it out. And he comes over, and God says, this is brilliant. You've still got too many people. I mean, this is wine press, man. And he says, go and take them down to the river, and if they drink one way, they're with you, and if they drink another way, they're not. And so now he's got to go back to his army of people and go, hey, how you doing? It's good being a part of 10,000, eh? Can I get an amen? Amen. Who cares about the 22? Who needs them? Yeah. Who needs them? Yeah. We're the 10,000, we're mighty. Okay, we're going to go down to the river, and we're going to have a drink. All I'm going to say is think before you drink, okay? All I'm going to say is, just don't do it quickly. That's all I'm going to say, right? 9,700 get it wrong. That can put a demand on your leadership, you know. And you've got like 300 people in. But no, then God comes again, he says, you're going to love this one, all right? No swords, trumpets and candles. It just keeps getting better. Yeah. And so now he's got to go to the 300 that have sent the 22,000 odd people, and he says, we're going to take up an offering, put your swords in. But it's all right, we're giving out candles. They're aromatherapy candles. They're powerful. I mean, can you imagine being a part of that 300? And they go over the hill. I would have sneaked a sword in. I would have. You would have said we're going into battle like that. Not because I was going to fight, it's just that how would my kids get past, what counselling could help them when they say, we found our dad on the battlefield dead and he was holding a candle. Yeah, he was laying there. He was laying there holding a candle. So for the sake of my kids, I would have sneaked a sword in. But they go over the hill, smash, rocky, boom, over, everyone dies. Come on, this was Gideon that was hiding here. God called him out of his wine press. So God says to me, call yourself an author. I said, I haven't got a book. And he said, Abraham didn't have a child. And I recognised the voice because it's the same voice that said to me, open a church, go to America. It's the same voice. You get to hear the voice of God. And people around you try and convince you sometimes it's not. Then you have wise counsel in your life. As long as you've got someone else that can hear God that says, that's God, you're good. And so I didn't realise I'd been working with a football player. There was a football player in England called Loa, great name. And he'd gone and played for Qatar. And so he was bringing me over, he was flying me over just to coach him spiritually, try and find the God section in his life. And so I'd go over, and it was a little bit of a mess, really. You know, as long as I was there, it was great. And then 3 weeks later, it was like, did I even go? You know, the lights was on this young guy. He was a superstar player. But I said to him, listen, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send you a little thought every day, just to spur you on a little bit, right? You're not getting it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm busy, all right? So I was sending this thought over to him and about 3-4 other people, another football player, Lynn Boy, who led our guys into the FA Cup win. And I didn't realise, I thought I was just writing this no grammar, no punctuation thought for the day. Try and work out where you breathe when you're reading it yourself, kind of devotional. And I was just sending it out, and I'd underestimated this thing called the World Wide Web and that, you know. And one day I didn't write it, and I thought, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered today, so I didn't write it. Suddenly I got an email, and it said, where's Breakfast of Champions? And I typed back and said, who are you? And he said, I'm a businessman in the Bahamas, and I send it to 5 other countries, and they all use it in their staffing. And I was like, oh my God. I remember sitting in Macca's, as you would call it. Macca's. We call it McDonald's, but Macca's. And I remember sitting and thinking, oh my goodness. And then I tell you, he writes at the end, oh, now you know you may want to do something about your grammar. He did. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And this thing was going out, like breathless devotions were going out. And so all that was going on. You see, that's what God was doing in the background, like he was doing in the background of Gideon. God was asking Gideon to step into something. And so I said, all right. So all of a sudden God said, you've already written your first book. I said, I don't remember that. I'm sure I would have remembered that. And he said, no, it's the devotions you've been sending. And I realised I had over 400 devotions that I'd written that made up for the year. I went, okay, so now I've got this block of devotions that no one can read. They pass out because they can't read. You know, no punctuation. Spellings are atrocious, all right? And I thought, all right, Lord, we'll do this if this is what you want to do. And so I go to the office and we've got this new member of staff that's just joined, a volunteer. And I said, hey Penny, listen, in between doing what you do, could you do me a big favour? She said, yeah. I said, boom, and I drop it like a phone book on the top, boom. Could you put full stops and commas and all that kind of stuff in this manuscript and just kind of make it readable? She starts to laugh. She said, do you know what my last job was? I said, no. She said, I was a professional proofreader. You see, God can't bring into your orbit until you step into your orbit. And the stuff that you're wondering how's it going to happen can't come to you until you walk by faith, because without faith it's impossible to please God, right?
Yeah.
We believe that, right?
Yeah.
And so I drop the manuscript in and she goes through it and she makes it, I mean, I'm reading it like, wow, that makes sense now. When I wrote it, it made sense, but I just forgot where I stopped and started. And so then I said, all right, I've got my manuscript. I thought, right, what the Lord had said to me was call yourself a published author. I went, all right, so I need a publisher, right? So I just picked one out, a Christian publisher out of the book, and I rang him up, and it was like that moment, you know, one of those programs when there's a secret camera and then they laugh at you afterwards? It was like that, because I rang this publisher. I said, hello, is that this publisher? I said, could you ask the manager to ring me back? My name is Andy Elms. And he said, no, wait a moment. And the owner of the company came on and said, is that Andy Elms? I said, yeah. He said, I was in your meetings 3 years ago, and God said to me, when this young man's ready to write, publish him.
Wow.
And I'm like, someone's laughing at me in an office. No one came in, so I thought, this is happening. And so he published Breakfast of Champions, and it's gone crazy around the world, and we did Breakfast of Champions too. And then somewhere in the line I felt God say, well actually, why don't you help other people publish books now? So for me it ended with Breakfast of Champions 1, but with God he was only just getting started. He said, because I found my way through the industry, I was ripped off. By Christian publishing I was ripped off. I was paying stuff I shouldn't be able to pay because everything had changed. It was no longer people on printing presses. Printing changed. But suddenly I thought, oh my goodness. So I felt God say to me, well, why don't you reinvent the industry? And I said, all right, okay. So I looked at everything that I thought was a rip-off that stopped me as a pastor getting the message that was on my heart out to the people. And I said, let me reinvent it. It's like when I wrote books, the first two that went through other publishers, I had to buy so much stock it nearly bankrupted me. And I only had a small circuit of people relative to the stock I had. And then I suddenly realised they're not putting any risk on me. They've got all my money the moment I buy the stock. And I said, okay, let me reinvent this. So I dropped that and made the risk on us so that if someone's successful, we're successful. If they're not, we're not. You know, I just began to add some norm back to that. And again, this is just something I do on Mondays. I'm a pastor. This is just keeps my head busy Mondays, the publishing. And I found a partner came in who'd worked with publishing for years.